Welcome everyone to Dovetail Learning's webinar today on Beyond Emotional Intelligence, How Emotions Speak to Us. My name is Chuck Fisher. I'm the Director of Transformational Learning at Dovetail Learning. I'm a transpersonal psychologist by training, as well as a HeartMath certified trainer. I've been teaching about emotions for 45 years to children, teens, families, educators, healthcare workers, and others. So glad you're here with me today. A little bit about Dovetail. We are a nonprofit. Our mission is resilience, really bringing it to children. We do that through adults. So right now we're concentrating on training adults so their impact of their own resilience really changes the world for children so that we can have a world of kind, connected human beings. Dovetail's work, all of our work, is an open education resource. It is licensed by Creative Commons, an international license across the world. And what that means is you can download and use all of our work for free. You can adapt it, change it, use it in your community. When you do that, we ask that you give attribution to Dovetail, collaborate with us and share back what you learn. And then if you publish it in any way, to share it alike, which means using the same international license that makes it free and open and in the public domain for anyone else to use. Today, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence. And we say beyond emotional intelligence because often emotional intelligence is thought of as competencies. And we're going to look at emotions very closely at what they are, what the emotional competencies are that is prevailing in the field, what emotional intelligence actually is, in addition to competencies. And then we'll look at a few of the emotional centering skills that we teach at Dovetail Learning through our We Are Resilient approach. So right to the emotions themselves. What the heck are they? I'm going to draw a lot from a personal hero of mine, Candace Pert. She was chief of brain biochemistry in the clinical neuroscience branch at the National Institute of Mental Health. She wrote this book, Molecules of Emotion, years ago, published over 250 scientific articles on peptides and neuropeptides and their play in emotions and the immune system. Just a brilliant scholar. And let's look at some of what she brought forward for us. She was one of the first people in modern times to really talk about body-mind intelligence. So we have the head, we have the heart, we have the gut, we have the entire body. And what she brought into the fore was a change from what Rene Descartes talked about in the 17th century. He split the mind and the body. He put the mind into the body into science and the mind into metaphysics. And Candace Pert and her peers brought that all back around so that we can more deeply understand that we are one intelligence that's infused with body-mind throughout the tissues and cells and organisms in our body. And you can see on this beautiful medical illustration here the vagus nerve, which fully embraces the cranial brain down through the central channel. It's fully involved in the heart. And then you can see that it also completely envelops the gut or the intestines. And it's a beautiful example of how the body-mind is fully connected. There are other examples we're going to look at. We'll start with what Candace Pert, she is considered the mother of the field of psychoneuroimmunology, or PNI. Psychoneuroimmunology is a big name, but it talks about three aspects of our self, our psyche, or the word psycho, meaning thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, what we generally consider consciousness and the mind. And putting that together with the neurological system, the neurons themselves, where and how they exist, how they communicate with each other through the nerves, And in the brain centers of the body, notice that the brain is written plural. There are now considered three brain centers. There's the cranial brain, which we all know about, filled with neurons. Turns out we have another brain now in science and medicine called the heart brain, a full ganglia of neurons, same kind of neurons in the cranium that exist in the heart. The heart has its own functional consciousness, if you will, that's separate from the brain and in the cranium. And then we also have a brain in the gut, and those same neurons also exist in the gut. We often say to ourselves, well, I knew something in my gut, or when I felt it in my gut, then I knew what it was. We've all had that experience. We might call it intuition, but it's literally a functioning organism, a functioning consciousness inside our body. So this whole idea of body mind and body mind intelligence is so deeply ingrained in emotion. Candace Pert said the molecules of emotion run every system in our entire body, creating the body mind's intelligence. Uh, oh, I forgot to click that. Yes, the immune part, psychoneuroimmunology, our systemic response to infection, how emotions are connected to that. You know, who here has not had an experience where you felt emotionally upset and maybe it gave you diarrhea or it gave you a sick feeling in your gut? This whole response of emotions and how we experience our emotions and how they impact our body and our body mind and our felt sense of well-being is so deeply ingrained in this idea of body mind, which is just a beautiful understanding of how emotions present themselves. So let's look at that a little more closely, looking at emotions in this body-mind system. You can see we have the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system, involuntary and voluntary. And the sympathetic system, we respond to stress with our heart rate. There, that red line, which is the heart rate variability. You can see it's out of sync. We respond biologically with cortisol, the stress hormone. We call it the freeze, fight, flight um, response to stress. On the voluntary side, we can regulate ourselves. We can use our breath to regulate ourselves. And when we bring ourselves into regulation, the heart rate variability literally starts beating in a coherent sine wave that's called heart coherence. Our body at the biological level starts producing DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone, the anti-stress hormone. And from there, we can face things, we can pause, we can presence, we can perceive from a stillness, if you will, rather than a reactive place. So again, we're in the exploration of emotion and how emotion will constrict us and tighten us up, and how we can release that and open into presencing and a more peaceful way of being by guiding ourselves. So just one more piece of science here, and this is the heart-brain connection. Institute of Heart Math and many other universities all over the world study the science of neurocardiology and the impact of the heart. Turns out that the heart communicates to the brain. 90% of the communication is from the heart to the brain, only 10% from the cranial brain down to the heart. And if you can see, the electromagnetic field of the heart here goes way out beyond our body. You can put someone with electrodes on their brain and their heart in a separate room and have them be feeling a person here in this room. And as I change emotional states here, the person who is all wired up in the other room also receives and changes in a similar emotional state. What's surmised, hasn't been completely unpacked, is that the wavelength of the heart is like a Wi-Fi system. And so when I have emotions, when I feel emotions, everyone else in the room can feel those emotions as well. We've all walked into a room where it was so tense you could cut the tension with a knife, or you've walked into another room where there's so much love and appreciation and you just want to be there and stay there. That's our intuitive body mind uh, system picking up on the heart coherence, the heart regulation of everyone else in the room. So, uh, back to emotional competencies. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, we often talk about emotional competencies. If I say to you, and here's a diagram from CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning, talking about the different kinds of competencies that we have. But if I just ask you the question, what is emotional intelligence? Pretty much everyone says, and I've asked this of audiences over years and years, um, we say, well, emotional intelligence is understanding what we're feeling, or picking up on what someone else is feeling, understanding what they're feeling, having empathy for someone else. Emotional intelligence is being able to read the room. I would call all of those competencies. So let's look at what the competencies are according to CASEL. The first is self-awareness. That's noticing our own emotions, being able to name them, feel them, understanding voice tone, body language. It's all in the realm of self-awareness, being aware of what's happening. When we move to self-management, we're talking about, well, how do I manage my emotions? If I'm upset, what do I do, and how can I bring myself into self-regulations, whether it's my emotions, thoughts, my behavior? How do I do all that effectively? That's a set of competencies. Social awareness is the next category. It's having perspective. It's having perspective on what's going on for someone and why they might be acting the way they are, and being effective in understanding others and having empathy for them. Going on to relationship skills, establishing and navigating healthy relationships. Relationships are so important, and they give us such deep perceptions of emotion. If we're out of relationships with someone we care about, we're upset. If we're in relationship with someone we care about, it just makes us feel so good. And it's considered like the most important thing to human happiness, is having relatedness, what we call relational resilience, with the people that we care about and the people that we love and the people that are also difficult for us. And then lastly, in this domain of emotional competencies, we have responsible decision making, which is simply making caring and constructive choices in our own personal and social behavior, and how that works for others in the world. So emotional competencies. Let's look at that through the lens of stressors. Stressors are our emotional reaction to stress. We're going along fine. We have a stress event. We have a reaction. We peak in that reactiveness. Eventually we calm down. Often there's a depletion afterwards. If you think about this in terms of self-management, we can manage our stress curve by using our curiosity and noticing how we're reacting. At Dovetail Learning, we have a whole set of patterns called protective patterns. Those are all emotionally based patterns. And if we're curious about our protective patterns, we can notice, we can wonder, assess, we can use choices to have and practice resilient skills that help us calm down. So we don't go through the roof, lose our cool, but we can bring ourselves back to center. And then eventually being able to use our curiosity, our choice, and our courage to anticipate some stressor, like a difficult meeting or something that's going to happen that we're gonna have during the course of our day. And we use all of those resilient mindsets of being curious about, well, oh, what's happening for me? Why am I getting stressed out? Oh, I can take a deep breath. I can relax. I can take a walk. I can call a friend. I can have a relational resilience. And then I can use courage and follow my heart to do the right thing and to extend my hand and relate and connect with others in a healthy, authentic way. So those are all emotionally based, curious, lights up our emotions, it regulates us. Having choice and making a decision calms us down and lets us know that we're competent, we're okay. Using courage is all about the heart and following the heart. Courage comes from the root word core, which means heart. So having courage is about following your heart and taking a stand on things that are important, and spending the time with the people who are important. So another dimension of competency is understanding our protective patterns. This is something we've defined at Dovetail Learning. Protective patterns we call our reactive resilience. It actually helps us as we react to things in the world. We've got 6 types of patterns. I'll just go through them quickly. It includes distrusting. And so when we doubt ourselves or we doubt others, that's just a natural reactive pattern to distrust when something doesn't feel safe. Or we might have hypervigilance, which is how am I constantly on alert? For me, my hypervigilance is about perfection and workaholism and trying to do everything right because that's how it operates in me. We also have the protective patterns of hyper caretaking and avoiding. Hyper caretaking is am I over prioritizing others? I mean, we all do caretaking. It's such a vital part of our human relations to care for someone else, to do things for someone else. But when we over prioritize someone else's care above our own, then we feel the expense of that. We deplete ourselves, and that's called hyper caretaking. Avoiding is am I withdrawing or retreating? And avoiding is another great one. We all avoid, we have to avoid in order to get by in the world. Something difficult happens, I might need to take a walk. I can avoid it temporarily. Sometimes we avoid things to great detriment because we never have that conversation with someone who's important, and unfinished business creates distance. So that relationship then becomes more and more distant if we avoid it. And it's one of the protective patterns that gets us in trouble. The last 2 are, whoops, I missed the slide. Defending and attacking, being curious about, am I acting as if others are constantly judging and criticizing me? That's a big one for me. I grew up in an alcoholic family, had a very raging father, so I learned to be defensive, and sometimes I have to step out of my own way so I don't assume that I'm being criticized and act defensively. And then other people are more someone who goes on the attack. It's a defensive, reactive pattern that puts us quick on the offensive. And it's fun to look at all of these, see which ones are at play in us, in our relationships. And when we can name them, as Dan Siegel says, if we name something, then we have the ability to tame it. So those are the reactive resilience patterns. They're all emotional patterns. Notice how they constrict us. Every single one of them constricts us. And what we're moving from is an exploration of, well, what constricts me emotionally, causes me to be reactive, and then what opens me up emotionally. Well, this is all part of the human condition. We're all this way. Every human being has an impeccable reason for being exactly the way they are. It all stems back to early childhood assumptions, beliefs, attitudes, often related to traumas of one kind or another. And it impacts our emotional intelligence. So finally, here we are, beyond emotional intelligence, or let's call it beyond competence. What exactly is emotional intelligence? Well, gosh, we've been talking about emotions this whole time. Here's some imagery of different kinds of emotions, down or excited, together, hurt, laughter, all these different ways that we human beings are simply emotional beings. There isn't a moment in time that we're not being driven by our emotions. As Candace Pert said, every body system is completely integrated. I didn't go deeply into the science, but the neuropeptides communicate with each other at this phenomenal level. The neurological nanoparticle level where this communication is going through all systems in our body, so that if I get upset, my immune system depletes instantly. Um, and when I bring myself back into laughter or play or joy or relatedness and love, my immune system is stronger. And this is all emotionally related. So we have many, many emotions. Here's an example from Yale University Center for Emotional Intelligence, the work of Mark Brackett. They put emotions into 4 categories: the sort of angry, sad, happy, calm. On the left side, you can see those are the narrow emotions. We might call those constricted emotions. And on the right are the broad emotions, the emotions that open us up, open up our neurology, open up our sense of well-being, and our signals for us. So signals, every single emotion is a signal. The question here is, what are emotions for? Well, emotions are communication. They're communication from our body to, let's say, our brain, our consciousness. When I feel something, my body is giving me this neurological felt sense, this bubbling up inside my body, and I'm constricting and I'm having a particular emotion, whether it's concern or anger or upset, or I'm feeling alienated or down. In all those narrow emotions, all of those emotions are trying to communicate to me. And on the other side, my happy, elated, my chilled out, pleasant emotions are also giving me information that here's what I'm doing that's helping. Here's what I'm doing that's in the way. And they're all value based. So we think about emotional signals. Let's take a few examples. Anger is an important signal that a boundary or value has been violated or crossed. It's such an important signal. Joy signals of what I'm valuing and loving. Frustration is signaling that I need to either alter my expectations or change what I'm doing. If I'm in a frustrating situation, um, it's a signal to my body mind that I'm doing something that's not working. So I either need to change my expectations or what I'm doing in order to be free of that frustration. I can use a positive reframe and think, oh, well, I had a flat tire today. That means I'm not going to get to this meeting on time. I guess, I'm going to just realize that I'll be able to pick it up in a different way. Guilt, I've violated my own standards. I need to shift my behavior. And let's also look at satisfaction. I met my own expectations, my goals. My satisfaction is letting me know that things are now complete. So, with all of that, what the heck is emotional intelligence? Well, it's so simple, we mostly miss it. And I learned this myself as I was working with teenagers over many years. And we were trying to figure out what emotions were and how they all worked. And it actually turns out that emotional intelligence is that intelligence, the signal from our emotions. Every emotion carries intelligence in it. It's communicating to me with its intelligence. If I'm angry, a boundary has been crossed. If I'm delighted, it's fitting my values of what I think should be right and good in the world. So emotional intelligence is just this simple but complex, complete phenomenon that we experience all day, every day. We're never without emotions. And when we feel them, we're better for it because we're more intelligent because of them. Um, I see we've got about 4 minutes left in this webinar, so I'm just going to give a light flavor on, well, okay, so we have emotions, we have protective patterns, we have our reactive patterns. Our emotions are signaling us, they're giving us intelligence. What can we do with ourselves with all of that? At Dovetail, we have this way of talking about using emotions to center ourselves. It's the first movement. We have three. The first is centering ourselves because we have to be whole and complete before we're very good for others. The second is reaching out and connecting with others. And the third is then turning together and being allies and collaborating together. So the centering skills are what we love to call ordinary superpowers. Everyone has them. This came from Ann Maston at the University of Minnesota. It's the everyday magic of being human, and what we can do to center ourselves is to notice. We can begin by noticing. Just notice, what are my protective patterns? What are my reactive patterns? What the heck am I doing when I get so upset with my best friend or my partner or my kids or my work colleague? What's going on there? Why am I getting so upset? Why can't I just see it, be with it, hold the space that they're in without having it throw me asunder? Uh, this is what emotions are all about. This is the discovery of how can I work with my own emotions, bring myself home to my center so I can be centered. Um, this whole idea of centering, connecting, and collaborating comes from my own experience in the martial arts. I've studied martial arts my whole life. I'm currently a black belt in Aikido, the peaceful martial art. And it turns out that the only way to have power in the world is to be centered. I have to fully center myself here in me in order to uh, be any good for anyone else. Um, so noticing myself helps me get there. The breath is hardwired to, our respiration is hardwired to our self-regulation and our heart regulation. If I'm upset, I'm constricted. I'm usually breathing tightly. I'm breathing from the upper chest. When I use my respiration, I take a deeper breath. It opens up my whole chest cavity. My heart has more space. My heart can now drop into a place of being more regulated. Remember that sine wave that you saw with the heart rate variability, which is the measure of the space between the heartbeats? Breathing allows that all to open up, as does letting go. Letting go is just an enormously helpful skill. If you ever find yourself just like on something, like you couldn't let go of it, something had happened and you're upset about it and you can't let go of it, well, actually, there's a skill called letting go, where we can take something and we can put it on the shelf for a little while, or we can release it. We can realize that it's not about us. What happened is something else that is true for someone else, but it's just not about us. We get so confused about this, emotionally confused. We think that something someone says to us is a reflection on us, when it's just not. So letting go helps, as does using gratitude, tapping into the things that we love the most, we care the most about, that we appreciate fully, whether it's a person or a pet or the sun shining or a breath of fresh air. Finding gratitude centers us, as does positive reframing, taking a situation that's half glass empty and looking at it with a half as a glass half full. And then finally, but by far from least, the skill of nurturing ourselves, which is letting go of over caretaking, letting go of hypervigilance, letting go of defending ourselves or attacking, and nurturing ourselves, doing what will help us most in our body mind, which often means using food as medicine, instead of eating a bunch of crud that's no good for us, a pile of sugar that throws us way off base. Eating simply and carefully, taking time to rest, nurturing ourselves with positive relationships and letting go of those relationships that are so toxic that sometimes we're in them because we're just in them and we've never really analyzed it. But nurturing ourselves, and then nurturing ourselves mentally and spiritually by reading good works and by doing good things and being in nature and having friends. This is all what this work is all about. And I'm going to, let's see, rest here. Let me see if I can find the closing slides here. Whoops, went too far. We've already seen that one. I'm just going to back up a couple. See if we can get into the ending portion here. So you can see that that Dovetail approach includes the mindsets, curiosity, choice, and courage, the patterns of cultural patterns and protective patterns. We talked a little bit about protective patterns. We haven't talked about the enormity of cultural patterns and how they're passed along intergenerationally, and then the 3 sets of skills that I named. All of this is available to you for free on our website, www.dovetaillearning.org. Digital downloads. We have circles and trainings and webinars. I'll be doing a coach certification training starting the end of the month. If you're interested in that, go on our website and look for it. And then you can purchase a hard copy of our materials. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me, chuck@dovetaillearning.org. And with that, I want to thank you so much for being here. Please use our work as you refine it and invent new ways of using it. Please let us know, because our mission is truly to help others and to create a kind, connected world.